It was supposed to be just a normal Thursday. Delhi was a lot colder than it is now, but we were all looking forward to the weekend. And then a bomb dropped, quite literally. Just an hour before dawn, Russian missiles lit up Ukrainian skies. At first, they hit the military sites in places that have since become household names for us, like Odessa, Mariupol, Kharkiv, and Dnipro. Our first reaction was shock. A war in 2022? Surely no one was that delusional. But for Vladimir Putin, the decision did not seem unusual. He felt that he had been boxed in, that he had no choice but to invade.
I have made the decision of a military operation. Whoever tries to interfere with us, and even more so to create threats for our country, our people should know that Russia's response will be immediate.
A special military operation. That's what he called and still calls the war in Ukraine. And a lot of people mocked it at first. But after seeing a real war in Gaza, maybe they agree. Putin described 3 goals in Ukraine: denazification, demilitarization, and neutral status. His position was very clear. Russia will not accept a NATO neighbor. Ukraine must remain out of Western military alliances. In the first days of the war, Russia made rapid progress. They made it very close to the capital, Kiev. People wondered where the Ukrainian leadership had gone. They finally emerged in this selfie video, the first of many that Volodymyr Zelenskyy would post from the streets of Kiev. He ditched his suit once the attack began, and since then we've only seen him in these military fatigues. The change of wardrobe made one thing quite clear: Zelenskyy wanted to fight. He was in no mood to sue for peace. In Europe and North America, the sentiment was the same. Joe Biden saw this as an opportunity. He was desperate to show Europe that he was not like his predecessor, that he was not a Donald Trump. So Biden plunged himself and NATO into defending Ukraine.
Ukraine will never be a victory for Putin. Putin may be able to take a city, but he'll never be able to hold the country. So we're going to continue to support the brave Ukrainian people as they fight for their country.
The West said Russia would lose, that sanctions would strangle its economy, that NATO support would push Russia back. Well, none of that has happened. Instead, it's Ukraine that is on the verge of defeat. So how did Putin pull it off? And was he right all along? The Western strategy was based on 3 ideas, or rather 3 very ambitious assumptions. 1, that Russia's economy would collapse. 2, that NATO military support could hold Russia off. And 3, that Putin would be isolated. Again, none of that has happened. Russia's economy has beaten the G7. In the ongoing fiscal year, their GDP is expected to grow by 4%. And the G7 nations, just 1.7%. Their currency is also relatively stable. I'm talking about the ruble, the same ruble that Biden promised to turn into rubble.
As a result of these unprecedented sanctions, the ruble almost is immediately reduced to rubble.
Well, status check. $1 was 85 rubles when the war began. It is 88 last we checked, so certainly not rubble. Militarily, Russia has done enough to gain the edge. Early assessments indicated a blitzkrieg, but 3 years on, it's a war of attrition. Both sides are digging in. Nonetheless, Russia controls almost 20% of Ukraine. They have moved slowly, but surely. And finally, the political isolation. Just look at these pictures since 2022. If that is isolation, I'm sure every leader wants a bit of it. Putin has expanded his ties everywhere except the West. He hosted African leaders in Moscow. He deepened his friendship with China's Xi Jinping. He found a new buddy in Kim Jong-un, and he retained India's partnership despite Western pressure. So fewer friends maybe, but isolated? Far from it. Which brings us back to our question: how did Putin pull it off? He did 3 things right. 1, he made sure that Ukraine and the West had no military path to success, meaning they could not win on the battlefield. Occasionally, Putin would stir the nuclear pot. He would hold drills with nuclear weapons, put his nuke responses on alert, and this spooked Western powers. They backed away from giving long-range weapons to Ukraine. They told Zelenskyy, defend, do not attack. In late 2024, they finally changed their position. They allowed Ukraine to strike deep inside Russia, but by then it was too late. Russia already had the upper hand. So Putin's nuclear rhetoric had a very clear objective: to keep Western support to a minimum. And this ensured that there would be only two outcomes in this war: either a Russian military victory or a negotiated settlement. The possibility of a Ukrainian military victory was removed. It's like a cricket team batting long in a test match. The idea is not always to win. It is to ensure that the other side can only draw or lose. The second thing that Putin did right was handling the economy. Russia is under some 24,000 sanctions, 24,000, yet the economy is stable. When the West ditched him, Putin turned east. He began selling oil to India and China. He also marketed Russian weapons to the global south, which kept his treasury full. Putin also invested in the BRICS. This used to be an alliance of 5 nations: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, 5 countries. But after the war, it has expanded. Today, the BRICS has 10 members, and together they're looking to upend the global order, maybe create alternatives to the Western system. And finally, the third thing that Putin did right: he did not pitch this war as some good versus evil fight. He was very clear: this is strategic for me. I have some demands and concerns. I'm ready to talk. If you agree to them, I will end the war. Which is what's happening right now. The West categorically rejected diplomacy with Vladimir Putin, but Putin did not rule it out. He never did it. He always kept the door open for talks, almost betting that some interesting party would eventually come in. And that party was Donald Trump.
I think that President Putin and President Zelenskyy are going to have to get together, because you know what? We want to stop killing millions of people.
So to put it simply, Putin played the long game. He was not in any hurry to take Kiev and plant the Russian flag there. In fact, you have to wonder if he ever wanted to occupy the whole country, or whether he just wanted to break up Ukraine. So instead of rushing, Putin waited. He watched as the energy prices spiraled out of control, as wheat and fertilizer supplies shrank, as inflation skyrocketed, as political opposition built in the West, as Donald Trump launched his campaign, as incumbent Western leaders faced abysmal approvals, as the far right surged in Europe, and as Trump retook the White House. It was a masterclass in strategic patience. But at the heart of it, it was a simple principle: who wanted it more? Did Putin want a neutral Ukraine more than the West wanted a NATO Ukraine? That was the question. Putin bet early on that the answer was yes, that he wanted a neutral Ukraine more. So, of course, a peace deal has not been struck yet. But as things stand, 3 years later, it looks like Vladimir Putin is having the last laugh, that his risky bet has paid off. And he's not done yet. He has a number of options to choose from. He could push Trump for more concessions, he could stretch out the talks to gain more land on the battlefield, or he could risk another gamble. I mean, Trump has already shown his hand. He wants to end this war ASAP. But if he cannot strike a deal, what will he do? Will he cut off military aid anyway? If he does, Putin could triumph on the battlefield. I'm not saying he'll do that. I'm saying that he has the option of doing that. And don't forget the broader realignment. Until now, Europe depended on the US for security, but Trump is removing that umbrella. He says Europe should take the lead in defending itself. It's a position that is catching on in America. This is a country with a history of isolationism. So it's not surprising that Americans want to stay out of Europe, which is again advantage Putin. An isolationist US means a weaker NATO. A weaker NATO means weak transatlantic ties, and weak transatlantic ties is good news for Vladimir Putin. He can assert his influence more freely. So all in all, it's a good time to be in the Kremlin. Things are shaping up nicely for Putin. Having said that, let's not forget a few things. One, it is easy for Putin to deploy strategic patience. He doesn't have to worry about voters turning against him, or worse, voting him out. That security allows him to wait the bad times out, a luxury that democratic leaders do not have. Secondly, Putin was right in his assessment. That doesn't mean that his actions were also right. Waging war is not acceptable. Ukraine is a sovereign country that can make its own choices. Russia cannot dictate terms to them. Yes, it is true that Zelenskyy played hardball, but war cannot be the answer. And finally, Putin's focus on Ukraine may have cost him elsewhere. His ally Bashar al-Assad was toppled in Syria, mainly because Russian air support was missing. Plus, he's got 2 new NATO members on his doorstep now, Finland and Sweden. Both countries were neutral, but after Russia's invasion, they've joined NATO. This once again shows how complex geopolitics is. A win is never absolute and a loss is not always complete failure. It's a question of maximizing what is good for you and minimizing the negative fallouts. In Ukraine, Putin has done the former. He has maximized his gains. Meanwhile, the West is scrambling to do damage control.
Merci beaucoup. Hi, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Namaste, Mr. President.
Bharat Kelogan, Komeri Namaste.
How many people generally follow you in interviews?
Typically, in a month, we have viewers up to 150 million. That's more than twice the population of France. And in the last 2 years, we had 3 billion viewers. So I say, Laurent, this is your chance to be famous. You're on Firstpost. One word to describe your equation with Prime Minister Modi.
Amitié.
As India and France work together, are you creating a new era of non-alignment in the technology space?
India is a training superpower. 1 million engineers a year, more than all of Europe and the US combined. So we have that partnership. We have a partnership on the environment and the economy. We also have civilian nuclear programs. And that is something we've developed far beyond the France-India relationship. So we want to work together on AI.
And then comes China with its DeepSeek, creating models at a fraction of the cost. Did that innovation take you by surprise? Did that breakthrough make you sit up and think, what did the Chinese do and how?
But what did DeepSeek do? They took everything that was already available from the last AI model and then they recalibrated it.
So are you going to ban Chinese AI in France?
So we don't have this American approach of banning tech because of where it comes from.